Alrighty, so for this lecture, I'm going to be talking a little bit about the scientific method on a more basic level and a more basic scale. So let's go ahead and start. So you'll see you'll see the scientific method expressed in like different ways. Some have 7 steps, some have 8, some have 10, some have 4, some have use some words, some use other words, and so we're just going to go over them kind of basically. So for like as fully as possible. So usually there's some type of weird thing that happens that you want to figure out, why does that happen? What's the purpose of that thing? And then you do some research, and then you say, maybe some people have done some research on this already, and read up on like what those people have done, right? This kind of research thing right here. And then you go over the hypothesis and say, maybe according to what people have said previously, right? Maybe the real reason, or maybe I can add to that by this thing that I'm thinking. And then obviously you perform an experiment. This is the most well-known part of the scientific method, and this is where you have to be very rigorous. And then you get some data that you analyze and collect from this experiment, and then you make conclusions based off of what you received in the data, and then you tell people about it. So we're going to get into those steps all one by one. So let's say, first thing, let's say you observe some phenomenon. Phenomenon just means anything that you don't know why it happens. And you say, why is there mold growing on bricks, right? Or just rocks in general? And you may wonder about it, and you probably will, examine it, or, maybe take a sample. And so you ask yourself a question formally. You observe this phenomenon, say, that's weird, there's this green stuff on rocks, and you ask, why does mold grow on rocks? Maybe that's the way you articulate your wonderment. And so then you read some research about it and figure out, maybe mold likes wet places, and maybe this particular rocky area was wet or whatever. Maybe, and then you say, well, maybe the mold likes to live in wet areas because it can live off of the bacteria from those wet rocky areas. Well, okay, so that's your hypothesis. Some mold live off of the bacteria off the rocks. So then you may perform some experiment. You have one rock in the wild with bacteria in that wet area, and one rock in the lab that's dry and it doesn't have any bacteria. Now, in the methods, like I mentioned before, you have to be very, very, very meticulous. People are going to be reading your research, for if you're a scientist, or even as a student, I'm going to have you, the more that you guys do research, the more I'm going to be saving you guys' papers, and you guys can read each other's papers and see examples every year. So depending on what year I'm at right now with you guys, it'll depend on how much there is to read. But you're going to be reading other people's research on Google Scholar, on other journal article websites, and if you were to read this methods and say this person did an experiment with one rock in the wild and one rock in the lab, you might be like, well, why did you only choose one rock? Why didn't you choose multiple rocks, just in case there was something maybe wrong with that one rock? Or maybe why did you only choose like this particular maybe limestone as opposed to another type of rock? And so you're going to want to be very meticulous and think about the different critiques people might give you on your experiment to make sure that you're getting at the most absolute truth possible, because that's what the scientific method is all about. It's getting at the root truth of something. So those are some limitations. Why only one rock? What about the type of rock? What about if it's brick versus rock or limestone? And you're going to want to make sure you have a good variety of types and a good number of each variety in each sample in order to have a lot of data and get rid of any other variables that might be messing with your experiment to make it wrong. For example, maybe that one rock just had some variable about it that made it particularly dry. Maybe that one type of rock doesn't usually get wet. And if you're examining it out in the wild, it might not have as much mold on it. Or when it's this particular rock maybe gets very wet easily when it's indoors, and so it may have mold grow in it while it's indoors, you know? And so there may be other factors that, like the characteristics of the type of rock, that may mess with your experiment and skew you from the truth or blur the truth for you. So you want to have variety of types, variety of rocks. Same thing if, you know, they're very meticulous in terms of the FDA when they're coming out with new medicines. So, very common example. You're testing a new headache medicine and you only test it on 3 people. And then if it passes those 3 people, then you disseminate it throughout the whole United States, right? That's not a very confident number here. Sample size is is something that you're going to want to take into consideration for making sure that your methods are giving you as much data as possible in order to get the most accurate picture possible. It's like puzzle pieces, right? Are you going to understand what a puzzle is going to look like only after 3 pieces? Well, maybe if it's like a little kid's puzzle, but so it really depends on what you're doing. But usually, in most cases, you're going to want to have the large sample size. The larger the sample size, the more accurate the data in terms of like its generalizability, like how well you can generalize it to the whole population, how well you can apply it to the whole population, whether it be the American population, or maybe just Utah, or maybe just a particular subset of people or types of rock, right? Anyway, so sample size is one thing in the method section of your experiment that you're going to want to make sure that you have a good accurate size of. Then you collect data. I just got this random photo online, but you know, you may have like temperatures here, like amounts of humidity in the air, the amount of water versus the amount of mold, so you know, the rock had, And so you're going to analyze this, and then you're going to draw conclusions from it and publish it in a journal. Now, this is one of the ways to disseminate information from, or to spread information from in the scientific community. And it has been for the last 150 years amongst the most popular scientists. There are these companies, maybe this one is the company on the top right, I just got this photo offline, but let's see, an International Open Access Journal of Medicine and Social Sciences. So this is probably the name of the company here in the bottom left, and they make these journals of, you know, medicine and social sciences. In this case, it's the Journal of Health and Social Sciences. So these scientists do research, and then they submit their like a resume of their research, or like a summary of their research to these journals, and these journals go through them and they say, I like this one, I don't like this one, I like this one, and then they pick a select number of those articles, and then they publish them, only a limited number of them, in each month's edition of their journal. And so there are top tier journals, there are lower tier journals, there are like very elite journals, there are journals that just accept anyone, and so scientists are always trying to publish in the top journals because then more people will read them, and they'll be more famous, I guess, and just more people will get in contact with them. So, and that's something that you have to do as a college professor. You have to be publishing in journals a lot, and that's like one of the requirements of being a professor. So, or a researcher in general, even if you're not working at a university, if you're working at a research lab, you have to be publishing, because if you're not, that's kind of like the currency for the research industry. It's like, if you're doing good research, you're publishing. If you're not publishing, that means your research is probably not that good. So that's kind of like publishing in journal articles is the way to kind of measure research. All right, so this is the way scientists, disseminate information. So, in order to further scientific knowledge through the scientific community, as you can see here, number 3 is publish results in scientific journals, like I was just talking about. But before that, if you're the first scientist to find out something new about the world, you're going to be the first one to further scientific knowledge. That scientific knowledge has now been illuminated to your mind, your individual human mind, that no other human mind knew this before, whether it be something as minute and seemingly insignificant as like figuring out why butterfly colors are different or whatever, to maybe something super important like maybe a new medicine that can cure cancer or something, right? Maybe you're the first scientist, whatever it is, you're doing research on it, and you're the first researcher, person, human in the world to find out this new truth. this scientific knowledge. So that's number one. You draw conclusions from your own experiments. You find out this, seemingly new information. Then two, you discuss the experiments with other experts, and like I have here in this photo at the bottom. You discuss with other scientists and be like, hey, I found this. What do you guys think? Do you think this is accurate? Do you think this is true? And so you talk about it. This is very common in the research community. Scientists discuss things with each other all the time. Then, and they're always collaborating. You'll always see multiple authors on a particular journal article. Even from different universities or different research institutions. They'll like work together at a distance, with different parts of the article. Then they'll publish the results in scientific journals, and finally they will conduct seminars and presentations at scientific conferences. Here's Einstein. I don't know if this is a scientific conference or not. Maybe it's a political thing, but nonetheless, scientists go to places like these and disseminate information. Here at the bottom, whoops. It's a lady presenting at what seems to be the United Nations or something, because they have a lot of those UN-looking microphones at each seat. So that is a little bit about the community, the scientific community, scientific method. You're going to need to know, feel comfortable going through these slides and just understanding what I have on here, and you'll be good for the questions on the quizzes and on the final.